When I started the Atonement Project, I was hesitant to approach Nicolas with an offer of involvement. A part of me felt that he would want a part in repairing the damage done by something of his own imaginings, perverted as it may have been. Another part of me didn't want to trouble his already troubled mind with something that was ultimately not his responsibility. Unfortunately, I knew that his genius was necessary in bringing the earth back from the dead. He was indeed eager to aid in the endeavor, insisting that though he was not directly involved, and far from intentionally involved, he still bore the guilt of partial responsibility. As much as I wanted to ease his guilt, I bore the same weight. Though neither of us had fired the gun, Tesla had designed it, and I had aimed it. It seemed like sheer blind coincidence that we should intercept such a pertinent message on that day. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, we were flying over the mid-Atlantic, and Oft had been fiddling about with the talk-box, its complex trans-dimensional communicative functions exciting his love of radio technology. He was engaging in what he referred to as radio fishing, the practice of expanding and diminishing the range of the talkbox's receiver as a fisherman draws his line. And on this occasion, Oft caught a bite. It originated from an isolated subwave frequency, invisible and unheard to any receiver of lesser caliber than ours. The message was written in a dense and convoluted code, and took every ounce of my wit to decrypt. The decoded message read, "Final testing complete. Performance at 100% efficiency. Preparations made for primary operation. Forces withdrawn from Dutch and Bavarian airspace. Awaiting the minister's arrival before proceeding with secondary arming procedures. God save the Queen." A secret message from Vicky's government would always pique our curiosity, and we promptly set about discerning its meaning. Oft succeeded in tracing the wire's origin to 70.5 degrees latitude, negative 21.7 degrees longitude, the east coast of Greenland, several kilometers north of Walrus Bay. From the look of the message, the site of some form of British science or military base, wherein some manner of top-secret hush-hush operation was taking place. Why else would they go all the way to Greenland? Whatever it was, we suspected a military operation by the mention of withdrawing British forces from continental airspace, as Augustus confirmed with his informants in Bavaria. As to the intended recipient, the mention of the minister's arrival pointed us to assume that the wire was meant for the offices of a member of one of Queen Vicky's countless frivolous government ministries, undoubtedly summoned to supervise the furtive operation in Greenland. Needless to say, the crew and I were intrigued, partly out of curiosity, and partly at the possible opportunity to make things difficult for Vicky's toy soldiers. Lytton promptly set a course for the icy shores of Greenland, and we began preparations for the unexpected. Lily set about re-insulating the main boiler to ensure the engine would not malfunction in the cold Arctic air. Augustus prepared a medical field kit suited to treat any wounds we might sustain in the forthcoming adventure, and Oft prepared the tools and weapons necessary for facing Arctic conditions and British troops. Elsa was pleased to hear of our destination, as Greenland reminds her of Denmark. Understandable. She proceeded to lock herself in the galley to prepare a special surprise Scandinavian dish for our return. Our flight lasted approximately 9 hours, during which I busied myself trying to deduce what awaited us north of Walrus Bay. It is here that I must reflect, as a time traveler, upon the first link in a long chain of terrible consequence. It was only natural that we would investigate. Curiosity had always kept us alive. Surely, had we not followed the wire to Greenland, the repercussions would have been equally terrible, however more immediate and perhaps more temporary. But that which weighs on my mind is the possible string of events which could have prevented any form of irrevocable calamity, or rather the absence thereof. As we flew north, I sent out an array of wires to colleagues and informants in Britain, Bavaria, Holland, and New Byzantium, seeking intelligence and insights relating to the intercepted message. The responses I received were both illuminating and puzzling. A spy for the scientific resistance in the British Ministry of War somehow managed to acquire a copy of the departure log for the Imperial air docks on the Orkney Isles for the last 3 years. Resourceful chap. The log had a record of the ships and their destinations, and indicated that 3 Imperial warships had departed on the 13th of July, 2997, bound for the exact coordinates from which the intercepted wire originated. This gave us an idea of what sort of reception to expect upon our arrival, as well as to suggest the military significance of whatever it was going on up there. Additionally, the log indicated that 2 heavy air barges carrying what was written as classified materials departed 2 months later for the same destination. Though this did not enlighten us as to the specific nature of the goings-on in Greenland, it did suggest that whatever it was large enough to warrant 2 massive air barges to transport it. In addition to this intelligence, I also received a reply from a conspiracy theorist with whom I once shared a room in Amsterdam for 3 months, and whose name neither I nor he can remember. He referred me to an article from the Amsterdam Telegraph dated January 3rd, 2999. The article reported that a Dutch airman by the name of Leopold van Jansen had been repatriated to his home in The Hague after washing up on the western coast of Iceland upon a large portion of what was once his vessel's hull. Van Jansen had been adrift for 6 days after his merchant airship, the Valkenburg, was felled by an unknown force whilst en route to Norway. He was hypothermic and near death when he finally reached Iceland, but he was able to give an account of his vessel's destruction. The Valkenburg had been flying east from Newfoundland, 620 kilometers southeast of Greenland, when their instruments began to read significant electrical activity in the ether several kilometers north of their position, which was noted as peculiar as there wasn't a cloud in sight. Van Jansen mentioned that the lookout called the crew's attention to a distant flash of white light on the northern horizon, though Van Jansen had not had the opportunity to observe this phenomenon, as the Valkenburg's port side was quite suddenly struck on full by what he described as an invisible shock-wave of hurricane force that sent the vessel plummeting out of the sky to ultimately capsize in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. Van Jansen and 4 other crewmen survived by climbing onto a floating segment of the capsized vessel. All but he had frozen to death by the time the provisional raft had reached Iceland. My conspiracy theorist friend had many interesting explanations accompanying this article, all which excited several flickering theories beneath my mad hat, but none of which I could tie directly to the intercepted wire. I consulted with the crew as to possible connections between the article and the wire. Theories concerning trans-dimensional portal collapse were raised by Augustus and Lilly, which would explain the strange force that destroyed the Valkenburg. We considered the possibility that Vicky had her toy scientists dabbling with trans-dimensional gateway technology in Greenland, but we agreed that this would not explain the presence of 3 Imperial warships. We reached the general conclusion that whatever it was they were doing was both of military and scientific significance, and decided it was best that we ascend to a height of 45,000 feet, 15,000 higher than the Valkenburg at the time of its destruction.